Well, I was born in March 18, 1925, and there were 13 of us in the family. I was in between two older boys and two younger brothers and sisters. The rest were all female, and never for want of company. We always had someone to talk to. In our home, I didn't realize, we were all categorized in one group. You're Mexican, that's it. Whether you was born in Mexico or you was born here or whatever. And it wasn't until many years later, because at home, Mom would speak English, and Dad also. So we all spoke English before we could speak Spanish. What interested me is that we were second-class citizens. We lived in a barrio. We had dirt streets. We didn't have sidewalks. We didn't have water with any real pressure. So I learned that by getting signatures of the people that own properties, that we could get things done. And I think that was the beginning of what I felt the ballot box could really do. All of us in that barrio went to Fremont School. Mm-hmm. Fremont was located on what we called 8th Street then, and Artesia. Artesia, what was wrong there is that they all put us in the same category, that you're starting school and you can't speak English. I could speak English, but that didn't matter. You go in the first grade, and then primary first and primary second, and by the time you get out of 6th grade, you're ready to be drafted. It's an exaggeration, of course, but good gravy. So then after that, junior high school, then high school. My brother suffered through the same thing, Alfonso. He was in the 10th grade, and he says, I'm going on 17. And look at all these kids. And it wasn't because he was a dummy. He was on the honor society throughout, from junior high to high school. But he says, I just can't put up with this much longer. Later on, I went to work at a restaurant on Bush Street in Santa Ana, between 3rd and 4th. And it was owned by a fellow by the name of Tony, who knew my dad. That's how I got the job. I was 16. And I always tell everybody that I got a job there pearl diving. It was washing dishes,
Oh, I see.
And he had a sign, Tony's Cafe Spanish Food. And he served Mexican food. And one day I remember coming back from the service, and I saw him outside of the restaurant. I said, hey, Tony, how come you have Spanish service? I said, when you serve Mexican food. He said, if I put the sign Mexican up here, ain't nobody gonna come in. It goes to show you, the extent of discrimination. Then one morning, he gets up, and I said, where are you going? I'm going to join up. Can't change your mind? No, I'll go with you. So we both joined up. So that's about the only thing that Al is a very intelligent guy. Very, very smart. But it's looking back a long ways. I know that you want to hear more or less about me, but I was sort of a nondescript. Alfonso, the Air Force man, he served for a time. For a time, he was scheduled to go. Where was he going to be taken? I don't know, but he was on a ship in the Pacific, and it didn't turn around, but he was transferred to another ship and came back, and he worked in Washington, D.C. in the garble machines, or where those real secret things that were able to all messages that came in from Germany and whatnot, and he was able to. That was him. I was on a troop carrier, okay, and we're heading toward the Philippines when we get the word that the war is over with Japan. But I didn't turn around and go back. I kept going. We ended up on the island of Samar in a place called Giwan. And we were having more problems with the Filipinos than we were with the Japanese that were left. You know, we had to go out there and see what we could get out of the jungles. But as sailors, we weren't really fighting men. We learned to work on ships, not to be out there in the infantry, but we're lucky. Alfonso died 2 years ago, so I'm the only survivor, along with a sister, Carol. That's the end of the 13 people, no more. I got out of the service, my rating was refrigeration. I'd see ads where they needed people they needed refrigeration experts, and they said, no, we don't need anyone. Or some would say, we don't want anyone with service experience. My brother Al got out of the service. He went to Chicago for refrigeration. He came out numero uno, and he couldn't get a job in Santa Ana. That's what prompted him to join the Air Force. I worked real hard. I think I held every political office in the Democratic Party in Orange County. I was co-chairman of the Robert Kennedy campaign in Orange County when he got elected, and then he was done in. That more or less was it. And because of my activity, and you can remember when Kennedy ran for office, there were all kinds of clubs, Viva Kennedy Club, and a lot of, I was real close to the laborers and hod carriers and all the other labor organizations. It was interesting. Out that there's a vacancy, he says, nobody can go ahead and get signatures, so I did that. Anyway, Cranston appointed me as a state inheritance tax appraiser. I was active in LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens. I think I was chairman of the local council about 4 times. And then I was the state, we used to call them, they were called governors, I think, or something like that. And then we had the national convention of LULAC at Disneyland, and I was elected the national vice president of LULAC, and so on, so on. Later on, I became the national executive director of LULAC, so it was quite an honor. In Orange County, we had 5 inheritance tax appraisers, and we decided that we would dig deep into our pockets and form a little treasury to help out the Democratic clubs, of which we were successful in that. Well, one of our members was well acquainted with the secretary of Governor Brown. And I think that our selection, or the ones that we recommended to the governor for different judgeships, I think there were about 12 successful ones. And me being a minority, and of course all these guys were real close friends of ours, and I said, well, how come we don't have an Hispanic? So that's when I presented the name of James Okay. Pettis. Then they said, Joe, the same group, the governor's coming in town, and would you like to host him in your home? And I said, hey, that'd be a good idea. At that time, I can bend his ear again because he hadn't appointed James. Well, in our home, I said, Governor, I'd like to talk to you. And all the rooms were busy, we were full of people, so we waltzed him into my bedroom. And he says, I know what you're going to ask me. I looked it up before I left the office. You're going to ask me about Mr. Perez. Yep. And he says, well, I've heard some bad stories, and I don't know that I should record what he had heard about James. And I says, well, it's not true. I says, I've known James for some time, and I know his new wife, everything. He has 2 children. And so he says, well, I'll tell you what, if it's as you tell me that it is, he shook my hands. Within 30 days, he's on the bench. And all those things dovetailed with what we were trying to do, is to advance the American-Mexican descent. And we did fairly well. You know, we'll never feel that we've done enough, but we did our best.